welcome along to the history programme with me, Tony Browne from the Limerick Historical Society. And tonight, as usual, I have with me my co-functionary, as another man used to say one time, Tom Donovan. Tommy, welcome to the programme anyway.
Good evening, Tony.
And tonight we have, I should say, well, it's the afternoon now we're recording this, but we'll say tonight anyway. I'm so used to saying that. I have with me Robert Kearney. Robert, first of all, you're welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
And I suppose I don't know what you would call yourself, but you can explain in a minute now that you're a member of the Mormon Church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Am I correct?
That's correct. The latter name is our official name. The first name you mentioned is a nickname that we were unable to shed because of the title of our book, the Book of Mormon, written, abridged by Mormon himself, a prophet.
Well, everybody would refer to this, I suppose, is if you saw two guys walking down the street, two elders, two missionaries, right? You wouldn't say, there goes two guys from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You'd say, look at the two Mormons, you know. First of all, Robert, I explained to people, I interviewed you on the radio. God, it must be 15 to 20 years ago.
It's about 17 or 18 years ago, yes.
Easily that, you know, and you had, is it Mike Kelly, I think, was with you?
Michael Kelly and Thomas Murphy. Thomas was the president of the district at the time of, that's more or less Munster and Connacht, where I'm the church history specialist now. And Michael was a local leader. I forget which position he served in at the time. Michael lives in England now, works for the church.
What's the hierarchy in the church? You know the way you have bishops, cardinals, and priests in the Christian. Yeah, okay.
The church was restored in 1830. It has the same hierarchy, more or less, as was in the New Testament Bible. It has a prophet, it has 12 apostles, it has 70s, it has bishops, priests, Melchizedek priesthood holders, it has elders, and it has teachers, priests, teachers, and deacons in the Aaronic priesthood. There are two priesthoods. There's the Aaronic and the Levitical priesthood, and the next one is the Melchizedek priesthood, called after that famous prophet Melchizedek from the Old Testament.
And what's the stepping stones? You know, when a member joins, what are they a novice or what are they?
Well, when a member joins, they become like the rest of us. We're all just members who go from position to position as we are required and if we are required. Yeah. And it isn't a matter of applying for anything in the church. In the church, you get interviewed if they need you for a position. When I was branch president for a few times in the Limerick branch, that would be similar to, you might say, a canon or a parish priest in a Catholic church or a pastor in a Protestant church. We'd be called a branch president. If we were in a bigger grouping, we would be in a branch. A ward is bigger, and the person presiding over a ward would be called a bishop. And they organize the branch according to the needs. If there's 150 people attending, we have various auxiliaries.
Who appoints the bishop? Is it the membership or is there a select?
They sustain him in an open meeting where they're asked to sustain him with the raised hand. And to sustain him means that you will abide by his direction and allow him to be the one authorized to organize the services, the interviews, whatever. And they're selected by our district presidency, which are above that. In Limerick, in Munster and Connacht, we're governed by the Limerick district. The Limerick is the central building, and Waterford, Cork, Tralee, Galway are among the branches within that district. And there's a district presidency. They decide who presides in each of the local units, like Limerick and Waterford, Cork, Galway, and Tralee. And
explain to the beginning. Explain about Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Just bring us up from one up to the other and to Salt Lake. What happened?
Well, when Joseph Smith was a young boy in the 1820s and that, he was born in 1805 on the 23rd of December. And, as a young teenager growing up, there was a huge, you call the word tumult, a huge amount of fighting for converts to what was now virgin territory in as you know, in America. And there were all these various religions and they were all touting their wares. Joseph, some of his family joined the Presbyterians, some the Methodists, etc. He was partial to the Methodist beliefs as they were at the time, but he was confused. And I'm going to very briefly tell you that when he was just before he was 15 years of age, he was reading in the Bible one day in the book of James, and James 1:5, I think it is, says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, which giveth to all men liberally and upbraided not. Meaning, you ask God, eventually you get an answer. So he thought about that. And then one morning, it was spring of the 1820, he decided, I'm going to pray about this, but I'm going to pray vocally, because not a lot of us would have prayed vocally at those times. So he went to a woods nearby. We now call it a sacred grove. And in the woods, he knelt down to pray. You know, in that prayer and after that prayer at a time, I don't know how long it took, both the Father and the Son, Jesus Christ, appeared in front of him. Now, the Father just introduced Christ by saying to Joseph, Joseph, this is my beloved Son, hear him. And then Jesus Christ took over. Now, you know, in the Garden of Eden, it was something similar. The Father introduced the Son to Adam and to Eve, etc., because the Son would be the one more or less in charge of this world. The Father has given him that authority. So he told Joseph, and Joseph's question was, you know, which of the churches should I join? And Christ advised him to join none, because the true church was not now upon the earth, as it had fallen away over the apostasy, you know, around the 3rd and 4th and 5th century, we read of the apostasy. And there was various restorations throughout the Middle Ages, as you know, after the Dark Ages. And Joseph then, you know, had that vision, was given that instruction, but he was told to come back, that there would be information made known to him in the form of a book written on brass plates, which was deposited in a hill not far from there.
Is it the Hill of Cumorah?
The Hill of Cumorah. At a later date, he went to the hill, was directed to where the plates were, but was told to come back on that date, September 23rd, I think, September, every year for 4 years. I missed one thing. That was 1820. He didn't have another real vision until 1827, but he did pray a lot, and he was told he would have a vision again. So then, 1827, he was told, come back every year on that same date. He came back, and on the 4th year, he was allowed to take the brass plates. We call them the gold plates, but they were brass, you know. He got the plates, which were rather heavy, brought them home, and over a period, and I'm scanning through very briefly here, it's a long story, he translated those plates. He translated them by the power of God. Those plates are now what we call the Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon is about 520-page, telling of the migration of Israel, from the house of Israel to the Western continent. They're settling there, some of their wars, their visions, etc. But one of the key points in the Book of Mormon is well within it, when Jesus Christ actually appears to what we term the Nephites, we call them. That was a name because Nephi was one of the great leaders, and they called the tribe after him. We call it a tribe, but this would have been millions of people probably at the time, you know. And actually, when he was there, he referred them to a scripture in the New Testament, which is there, which says, there are other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. He said that to the people of Israel. Them I will visit. Now, there's no other place and record in history where Jesus is reported to have visited other than the house of Israel, except for the Book of Mormon telling of that story. 3rd Nephi chapter 11, where Christ appears to the Nephites. He teaches them, he renews them spiritually, and in time, he leaves them. Now, this was after his death, before his ascension into heaven. He went to visit them. So that's a very brief telling. Now, Joseph in 1830, on the 6th of April, was given instruction to organize the church and restore it to the earth with the same, shall we say, organization as existed in the primitive or New Testament times. Now, this full organization did not happen on day one. It happened over a period of years and decades. And even as later in these last decades, we've had some of the pieces put back together, the calling of people that would have been in the time of Christ. So we do have apostles and prophets. We have 12 apostles. We have one prophet, Russell M. Nelson. He's 95 years of age. And twice a year, we have what's called a general conference, broadcast direct from our headquarters in Salt Lake City. Now, the churches and the branches and the districts are very, very autonomous within the church. while there's a guidance from Salt Lake, it's very autonomous, where we have a headquarters in Stuttgart for Western Europe. There'll be a headquarters for Scandinavia somewhere else. So that all things are kept as local as possible.
You have to skip in now. What happened with Joseph Smith and Salt Lake? You jumped down to Salt Lake. What about Joseph Smith in New York and moving? What happened?
Well, Salt Lake, Joseph Smith was never in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
In fact, Joseph Smith, born in Harmony, Pennsylvania, he brought the saints across the plains to a certain point, and he was martyred himself. Himself and his brother Hiram. In fact, Joseph and the Latter-day Saints, as we call ourselves now, I want to be distinct here and let you know that the word saint does not imply perfect people or people that are better than anybody else. The word saints, you'll notice, is in the New Testament when Paul and those write their epistles, they write them to the saints in Corinth and Ephesus and everywhere else. The word saint simply used is much like the word Christian or the word member, etc. Joseph and the saints were hunted out of wherever they were. They were in Kirtland. We built a temple there. The temple was destroyed. The members were removed. Members went to Nauvoo. They built a temple. They had to leave there. And around that time, let me just get this right, 1844, I think. Yes, in June of that year, Hiram and his brother were wanted. Of course, he was arrested and charged 56 times and never convicted. He was charged with various things, preaching falsehoods. If people want to arrest you, as you know now, this is America, could happen here. If people want to arrest you, they'll trump up a charge, they'll arrest you, and then they'll let you go. We didn't have habeas corpus as strong in those days in the States, I dare say. We look at you, come out of it, He did. But the final in that June of 1844, Joseph and his brother Hiram, Joseph had escaped any possibility of being arrested. He'd left the state. But some of the members came to where he was, and they said to him, this is an historical fact. They said, Joseph, you're wanted, and we're without you now. We're on our own, and you have left us. And Joseph, one of his statements was, if my life is of no value to my friends, then, what value is it to me? So he came back. He gave himself up. And in doing so, he was incarcerated in a jail, peculiar name for a jail, actually. Liberty was the name of the jail, which is peculiar, Liberty Jail. Himself and Hiram were ensconced there. And a mob of, they reckon, about 500 people, mostly faces painted black, broke into the jail. And the jailers, of course, just left. They weren't going to be able to hold the mob anyway. They killed Hiram and they killed Joseph. There were two other brethren with them, John Taylor and I think it's Willard Richards, but John Taylor was there. They escaped with their lives. And so they thought when they finished Joseph that was it. And for 3 years, we didn't have a prophet, but we did have the Council of the 12 Apostles, led by Brigham Young. Brigham Young was really a man of his day. He was a stern man, a very fair man, a very charitable man, and a very highly skilled artisan in carpentry and other things. And under Brigham, who was the prophet, well, about 3 years later, he became the prophet. After a revelation from the Lord, whom he simply said, we can't continue without a prophet. Now is the time for you to, become whatever. And from that day to this, the head of the 12 apostles, the current head, who is Dallin H. Oakes, they are the new prophet in standing when the present prophet passes away. The only thing that would change that, if a revelation came that it wasn't to happen, or if that leader of the apostles committed a grievous sin. Because in the church, a priesthood holder who commits a grievous sin such as adultery or unchastity or, God forbid, child abuse, they will be excommunicated from the church and allowed to work their way back in.
You have to send there if they committed adultery. Having the Mormons a name for having 14 wives and 15 wives.
Actually, that wouldn't be adultery. That was the law of polygamy.
Yeah.
The law of polygamy is not a law of adultery. Adultery is when people, one married person, and of course,
I'm going to be smart.
The law of polygamy was discontinued at a conference on the 6th of October, 1890 or so. The church.
It has lived on, hasn't it? It's amazing.
No, it hasn't lived on in our church.
Yeah,
It
would
has
you?
lived on in breakaway churches who would not accept the prophet's instruction that the law of polygamy is to be discontinued.
But
There
it
were
did.
a few. Sorry.
It did give him a bad name. Would you agree, Tom, that when you
Yeah.
think of Mormon marriages, you think of fellas
Mhm.
with 15 wives, and you do think of that. You know, it's something in
Yeah,
your.
well, as Robert said, it's been done away, but the image lives on. You know,
It has.
I suppose it's bad press. The Mormons get a lot of bad press. You know, I suppose a lot of religions get it, but yeah. So, and there is a belief out there that you are allowed to marry more than once in the Mormon Church, even though you say it's
Because
done away. Yeah.
because there are Mormons who are not members of our church who
Yeah.
call themselves Mormons. They're
Yeah.
breakaway. There's a couple of breakaway groups from our church.
All right.
Some of them broke away because of the law of polygamy, because they wanted to continue.
But
I would
see,
like. Sorry.
to the uninitiated or the uneducated like me, Mormons are Mormons. So if it's a breakaway, I just
Yeah.
take it as Mormon. So I don't differentiate, whereas you would. You know what I mean? So that's
Well,
why. Yeah.
Many years ago, Tony Cusick and John Sherlock and I, they're two judo exponents along with myself, on a holiday in Killarney for a weekend. On the Sunday evening, we were kind of this is around 1971 maybe, we were at kind of a loose end. So we went into a local Catholic church. And when we were there, we sat down and a priest came by and we got chatting to him. And it transpired that he was married. And we misunderstood because he was a member of the Catholic Church, which is not under Rome. And there are Catholic churches, the Catholic Church of wherever, who are
Yeah.
not Vatican Catholic, shall we say.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There are many Protestant churches, and there,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
How
there's probably 1,000 Christian churches, you know.
Oh yeah, and every church is like down through the years have breakaway groups, and you know, it's like no different to political parties. Yeah.
we think most of
Yes, you might say that. Yeah, okay.
a few questions, Robert. First of all, Brigham Young found this land anyway in Utah.
Well,
He came
Brigham Young
friends, didn't
Brigham
he?
Young was the prophet in Nauvoo. When the
Yeah.
saints who had built Nauvoo was swampland when the saints came, when the Mormons, shall we say, okay, the Latter-day Saints came, they settled there, and many of them died because of the fevers, because it was a wicked place at first for the weather and for swamps and everything. They built it up, they made it solid, they built a temple, they built a house, they built entertainment halls, they built churches, they made it into a fine city. It became almost a city that could nearly challenge Chicago at the time, which was the capital, and lots of people didn't like a number of things, including Latter-day Saints being elected, because they could now possibly threaten to be elected to the local Senate or whatever. And so there was, you know, when a mob comes out, you go to a mob that are out in action, like any mob you can think of today. There's 10 or 20 different reasons for them being there. They all gather together, but I have one reason, you have another, you know. Sometimes when I've had strikes, when I've been a shop steward, there might be 50 people on strike, and there might be 10 of us who remember what we went on strike for. The rest of them might have other reasons. They might want to get Joe soap or Mary soap. And, you know, it begins to break up. So Brigham Young had a temple built there as well. The temple was built, and they decided they had to leave. So Brigham, it was so cold that winter, many people, several thousand people died on the treks across America for the Latter-day Saint Church, you know. Brigham led the saints across the river, which at the time was frozen solid. They went across with their, you know, wagons, trains, handcarts, etc., on the ice. It was that cold. And they journeyed altogether 2,000 or 3,000 miles across America, not from Nauvoo now. They had traveled over years. This is the year 1944, 45, and 46. So they took them a long time, maybe, I forget, within a year, to go from Nauvoo. And they kept crossing, and they'd set up camp, and they'd stay there for a week, and then they'd stay there for winter. And then one day, they're coming up a high mountain. Brigham was really very ill with a fever. He's in the back of a wagon. He's so sick, lying down. And they get to the top of this hill where they have it. I said, he sits up, leans on his elbow, looks over, and his words recorded are, "This is the place." And that was a barren valley. They met, actually, traveling towards that hill and over those mountains, they met a famous man called Jim Bridger. Jim Bridger records that he said to the Mormons, he said, "Listen, you guys, you know, if any of you could settle there, I'd give you a year of my pay to do it, because that's a barren land." It was there full of the Salt Lake Flats. It was wild, and they made it blossom as the rose, as the Old Testament and New Testament would say. They made it blossom as the rose, and it became a very fruitful vineyard. And if you've ever been to Salt Lake, you will see that even in those days, Brigham devised and planned a town. He was a very, very brilliant organizer. He devised a town that has streets that to this day, and we've been there, you have 2 lanes that going up one side, 2 lanes going down another side, and a railway line going up the middle. He built roads that wide. They arrived in, I think, the 27th of July 1947 was, I think, the date when he echoed those words. I'm half sure of that, but that's not important.
1947.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
1847.
Again, listen, just a few things out because time will be gone. 2 things. First of all, I should tell people out there, with Tom Donovan as usual with me here, I have Robert Kearney. Robert is from Toomingate, which a lot of people will probably think you're American, although you haven't an American accent. Yes, you might get one of those, in another time. But Robert is from Toomingate originally, and he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which their church is near the shopping centre. It's the Crescent Shopping Centre. If you're driving outside, it's most people know the building anyway. On the right side, as you're going up to the Crescent Comprehensive.
There's a head centre right beyond us on the same side.
Yeah. Now, 2 things, Robert. First of all, can you explain, how you got involved, and also what is the connection with South America? There's a connection with South America, isn't there?
With South America?
Yeah.
The only connection with South America is that
around appearing in South America, isn't there?
Say that again?
Isn't there a connection between and a vision in South America, or that God was in South America?
Yes, that's when I said he appeared to the Israelites who had emigrated 600 BC. Some of them had emigrated hundreds of years before that. The main immigration, which involved this Nephi whom I spoke about, whose father had a vision in Jerusalem, telling him that Jerusalem would be destroyed. He took his family and a couple of others away, and they crossed the Atlantic, and they landed in South America, mid-America, mid-South America, somewhere probably around Mexico, etc. We're never 100% sure, and the experts reckon it's around there because they spread quite widely. That's where Jesus appeared. When I said in the Book of Mormon it's recorded, he appeared to those people after his crucifixion.
Did you know that? Did you come across that, Tom?
I had you saying it before. So, yeah. But no, I'd be interested to know how Robert got involved in the church. Like, I presume you were brought up Catholic.
Yes, and a practicing Catholic. Some people have often said to me, well, when you fall away from one church, you go to another. It wasn't the case with me, Tom, and not with most people. I was a practicing Catholic. I always believed in God, always believed in Jesus Christ, always believed in the atonement, the resurrection, etc. I was in Glen for almost 3 years in St. Joseph's School. In my book, I point out, sorry?
Thomas from Glen, but he's not in Glen, but he's from Glen.
Well, this is what I point out in my book. In the first few pages, I point out that Glen got a bad name. When I was a little nipper, if you did something wrong and your father said you go to Glen, I would never do anything wrong again in my life.
Yeah.
Genie, I'd rather go to the, the Gulag Archipelago in Siberia than Glen from what I heard.
Down through the years, there's 2 things associated with Glen. The good thing is Adam's Garage, and the other one is the industrial school. And the Colleen Bourne murders.
Yeah.
We had that 2 years. 2019, we had the bicentenary of that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And when I was in the, we used to be allowed home for a month every summer to our homes, and I came home in the month of June in 1963 for a holiday for 1 month. I'd have to go back at the end of June. I'm at home one night with my brother and my cousin Sean Pierce. And we're sitting in the house. I'm about 15 at the time, just before my 15th birthday. Knock comes on the door. My brother opens the door. There's no adults in the house. My brother's 3 years older than me this time, and so is our cousin. And there's 2 guys, the usual, the badge, etc. He invites them in, sit down. They take out flannel boards. They give us the first discussion, as we call it, at the time. We don't use flannel boards anymore, far more sophisticated, even though that was quite good at the time. They taught us the first discussion, as we call it. On leaving, they asked, could we come back again? And my brother said, certainly. So they made an appointment. It's 1963. They never came back. I forgot all about it. I went back to Glen. I finished there when I was 16. Came home, 1964, I came home. April 1975, that's 12 years, 13 years after, whatever, 11 years after. I'm walking down the street with my wife, Pauline, and we're stopped at what we call the street bars across from Pat Grace's takeaway, as it used
Yeah.
to be,
Ulster
near the
Bank.
bank, Ulster Bank.
The old
Yes.
bank.
Yeah, and I was asked by a missionary called Elder MacDonald. I was asked, excuse me, could I ask you a question? He said, I said yes. He said to me, do you think Jesus Christ could have appeared on the American continent? And I said, Jesus Christ, being who he is, if he says is who he says he is, could have appeared anywhere he wanted. So he spoke to me, and then I invited him to our flat at the time up on Wolftown Street, and they visited me for quite a while, and my wife. That was April of 1975. I fought against every instinct I had to leave the church I was a member of.
Yeah.
In the 9th of October 1976, I finally was baptized out in the Corbally. We call it the Corbally Bats, just down a bit near the little bridge. My wife was baptized soon thereafter. That was 1976. But I had attended church for a year and a half. Down beneath Holla-Ida. It was the Holla-Ida. About in 1977, we hired out right next to Kaiser's. Before you get to Kaiser's, there was 3 steps. We had 3 floors hired there until the year 1980, when we saved up enough money to pay a 20% deposit on an acre of land out where we now have the chapel. We bought that in 1980. In 1981, the building started, and in May of 1982, we moved into the building and started to meet there, and we've met there since, and have had 2 extensions in the meantime, so that we now have all the extensions we're going to get. We can easily fit maybe 200 people. Even we've had 288 out in September 2009, I think, when we had one of our apostles visit Limerick, Elder David A. Bednar.
This is pre-COVID now, Robert, remind people.
That's right. It's all pre-COVID.
You didn't have 200 there this week.
Today we can fit 50 or 60 in during COVID safely.
I should tell people as well, which we'll talk about now, people going back on the older members of our own or listeners will remember the Yarmouth fish store. It was number 2 William Street. I remember as well. I do. Just the Saxon, right next door to the set, which is now a Junior's. It's next door to the Saxon. And what's your connection with the Yarmouth fish store?
My mother and my mother's parents owned the Yarmouth fish stores. They passed away. My mother and her sister owned the Yarmouth fish stores, but the sister was never around. My mother ran it. She was supposed to be an astute businesswoman. She ran the Yarmouth fish stores, and so that's we had plenty of people.
What was the name? What was your grandparents' name that owned it?
Well, my mother's name was O'Farrell. So
but her parents were O'Farrell, were they?
Her parents were O'Farrell. Yeah. My father's parents, Dan Kearney and Noonan, I think. Yes, the Noonans would have been back in my genealogy. I've done 4 or 5 generations.
No, but the O'Farrells owned the Yarmouth fish store, and then the 2 daughters ran it. The 2
daughters owned it then because they passed away. So my mother and my father, in theory, my father worked in ranks at the time. So we were fairly well heeled when I was born. We had a stuffed pheasant in the front room. We had, with all those things going for us at the time. I barely recall it because I was too young when my mother left. As a matter of fact, I when I tell people I came from a broken home, they say I know, and I say I know because I broke every stitch myself. We were left uncared for many years when my mother left. My father was an alcoholic, you see, unfortunately.
What did you Rob? Did you end up in Glen?
Well, I left school at about 11.
Yeah.
Gave it up completely at 12, where I was working in Sevens. I worked in Sevens as an assistant to a driver. I was instructed that I had not done a primary cert. I hadn't attended more than 4 or 5 months of 6th class. So I was told I would have to attend the 1 day a week, every Thursday up.
I'm a pupil from the 1 day.
Royal Cinema. Sorry?
Right, yeah. I'm a convert from there. I got a gown and a cap when I left the 1 day.
Okay, yeah. Well, I didn't go. I went once and I thought, this isn't really anything for me. So I did stop going. And then one day, actually, I think it was the 5th of November, 1961, my father said to me, it was a Friday, he said, we're going to court tomorrow. I said, what? I'm 13 years of age. He said, we're going to court tomorrow. I said, what for? Don't worry about it. He said, it's nothing serious. So I went into court the following day, and that was the last time. I was taken by squad car to St. Mary's Garda Barracks, and I left there Court was about 11 o'clock. Left there till about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the day when the squad car was assigned to bring me to Glyn. That was the 5th of November, 1961, you know. So,
for not attending school.
oh yes, but that's what most people were there for. I mean, I remember one time a letter came to me to St. Joseph's Industrial School, and Brother Cullen, who used to deal with the mail, said, would you ever write back and tell them this is an orphanage? He said to me, whatever it was before, it's now an orphanage. They were all, one day when I was standing outside the near the front pitch, near the Christian Brothers rooms, a car pulled up, and a man and woman got out of the car, went into the cloisters, sat down for a period of time. I can't remember how long it was. They came out, 4 children were taken out of the car, and the couple drove off. Those 4 children were aged from about maybe 6 up to about 12. 4 boys, the Bonds, their name was. They were left there by, I presume, their parents or someone like that. And they were there until they were 16. I thought it was the saddest thing I ever saw, you know, but they hadn't done anything wrong, you know.
Well, I know a man, he's dead now. His mother was featured in Angela's Ashes, and he told me he was in court like you, and there was another boy there, and his father came and he said, I want him to be educated in the Church of Ireland, not Catholic. And the judge said let him go because there was no available space in a church. He was advised well. So he felt doubly aggrieved because the 2 of them went in together and one went home and he was taken to Glen, you know.
The young boy was taken to Glen, yeah.
The young boy was taken to Glen, this man, he's dead now. But the other boy was let go because the father asked to have his son educated in the Church of Ireland. And there was no...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the judge asked my father, Garda Pat Hickey, I think it was Pat, he had some connection with the Bail and the Blah afterwards, a historical event. Nothing bad, you know. I saw an article. He was a good guard. He was the school guard. He cycled around our area on a bike, and he picked me up. And the judge asked, "Why is this boy here?" And Garda Hickey said, "This boy is unsupervised. He doesn't go to school, and if he's left as he is, he'll get into deeper trouble." I hadn't been in trouble actually. And so, is his father in the court? He said, "Yeah." My father stood up and he said, "Yeah, you're the father." Yeah. He says, "What do you suggest?" And my father said, "I think you should send him away." That's the first hint that I got from my father, who had told me the previous night, telling me about the court, had told me no problem, you know. It turned out to be the best, of course, in the end, I have to say, you know, because I mean, look at our society today, where children are unsupervised in many areas, different types of areas, and they wait till they're old enough to put them in jail. Until they commit a big crime. And it's a sad thing. You know? We talk about sharing, but you know.
What was your experience? What was your experience in Glen, Robert? I mean, it can't have been easy, you know, being...
Well, when you say easy, you have to remember it's where you come from decides how you feel about where you are. There are people who come from abroad who arrive in Ireland who are living in tents, who may feel they're doing well now. Eventually they won't, of course, you know, that's natural. I had no parents looking after me. I hadn't proper clothing. The reason I stopped going to school, but I loved school, I had no school books for a whole year. I would get slapped. I would be told, tell my father. I would tell my father. He would say, I'll get them for you on Friday when I get paid. Friday would come, Friday would go. I'd go to school Monday. So I said, so I didn't have anyone to cook meals. Since I was about 6 years of age, I cooked for myself, made my own meals, went to the shop and got my own food on the book, as they call it. My father paid the bill every Friday. So I didn't have anyone looking after me. I didn't have that many friends. I had acquaintances because I was the ragamuffin on the street. And I was probably a bit of a headache for some people because I didn't have to go home at 9 at night or 10 at night. And I spent a lot of my time in a nearby office receiving apples, actually, you know. So.
Your brother, I knew your sister. I knew May. Your sister May, did you?
Yes, I still have. She's here living in Limerick. God,
I haven't seen May for years, but I remember May. But your brothers as well. So what happened to them?
My brother Adrian. Okay, my brother Peter went to Letterfrack, a place I really visited recently for the first time 2 years ago. My sister May, as soon as she was old enough, went to England, and she went to England, lived in Germany, lived in Denmark, lived 40 years, married in Belgium, came home about 5 years ago, settled back in Limerick with her husband, Mark, a wonderful man. She was very fortunate to marry him. And my brother Peter, his twin died as a child, and Peter died about 8 or 9 years ago. And before he died, he made the following comment. He said, "It was indeed a privilege and an honor to be reared in Thormengate," he said. "It was a beautiful place to live, and I'm glad I was born and reared there." So I take that to heart as well. I it to be a marvelous city. I find Tuamagate was a marvelous area. I don't live there now, so I don't know. But it was a beautiful place, you know.
But getting back to, I met a lot of boys from Glen because, unlike you, they wouldn't get the fare home to go home in the summer. So they'd come to our farm to work. Well, that was the theory anyway.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
and so we knew them. We lived with them for a long time. But I never heard at the time, that's not saying it didn't happen, any bad stories. But what was your experience there? I mean, I know it's relative from where you came from, you say.
Well, first of all, when I was in then first, I was sent to the tailor shop to gain a trade.
Yeah.
I worked there for about 9 months or so, and an opening came in the kitchen. The boy in charge of the kitchen was leaving, and they needed someone to take over. Several applied. I got that job. So I went from not having any direction in life to, first of all, getting quite a bit of knowledge about tailoring. I used to make trousers and that and things. So I didn't make coats. I made parts of them. The head tailor, a man from outside, from Mr. Delan, I forget where he was from exactly.
Yeah, Dr. Delan,
Yeah, he used to drive up on a motorbike.
Yeah.
A little, a moped. He was the instructor, and he would finish any product we couldn't. But the kitchen, then I suddenly become in charge of the kitchen, which was really the plum job. I mean, I was never again hungry, you know. I mean, people would fight on me because when the food became dished out, we would dish it out in the big long furrows with 12 in each, and whoever sat next to me got what I wouldn't eat, you know, because they just serve it out anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, I, for example, in my first few weeks there, I was slapped several nights for wetting the bed. Naturally, something I did because of the situation I was in. I didn't like that. I didn't consider it cruel at the time. That was fairly standard. I got slapped with munchings as much as I ever got.
Whose dog is that? Drop your hand. Who's the innocent one with the dog barking? Is it mine?
They're mine.
Yes, so I had a fair amount of latitude in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, I got up every morning at 5:45, except Sunday it was about 6:30 when I get up, because I would have to have meals ready and stuff.
What time did you get up? Quarter to 5?
At 5:45 every morning, yeah. And now I still get up at 6 in the morning. I've done that all my life. I remember one of my daughters remarking there a few months ago, what about the day we found Dad in bed on a Saturday at 9 o'clock? Yeah. But I get up habitually, you know. If I go to bed at 1, I get up at 6. If I go to bed at 10, I'm awake at 4 or 5, but I get up at 6, or sometimes earlier, sometimes 1/4 past, but 6 is my time.
Stay here now, Tom. You don't know this, but he's written a little book on his life, privately.
Yeah.
It's a lovely book. I didn't read it all out because he only gave it to me on Thursday night.
Okay.
And we had a bit of a chat Thursday night for 4 hours.
Yes.
I read it I opened the book as random, you know, and I read various passages from it, you know. But it's a lovely book, and I'm sure people will be interested in getting it. But it's privately published. You got to print it yourself and pay for it yourself, you know. Yes. But it's very interesting to read. You know, there's some things in it. A lot of things that I can equate with Limerick, you know, and like that going to Glen and then coming back into various places. Could I just ask you a question here? You seem to have had more jobs than what's his name, Tiger Woods' clubs.
I had 20.
How many? 20
jobs. The first job I worked in was Savins. I'm working now in LIT. Every other place I worked is closed down.
Hey, is that a good sign or a bad sign?
Well, I worked in the Crescent Clothing. I worked in the shoe factory. I worked in Payco. I worked in Ranks. I worked in down the docks for a while. By day, I mean, you know. And I could go. I worked out in Shannon Lapidary, and I was in Foss. I was in Anco in 1969. I was in Foss in 2006 when Full Flex closed. I worked in Full Flex. I could go on. I worked in 20. So that includes the Foss and the Anco. And each was a progression, except for one time when I went back a bit. But I've been very fortunate. The title of my book is I Did Not See That Coming. And the message being that every time a door closed on me, a bigger one opened. And that's been my experience, you know.
Yeah. You mustn't have been liked to be in these places.
No, I left, other than closures, there was about 4 or 5. For example, I left one to go to another. I left a job where I was a training officer in the jewelry factory in Rathkeil Anderson's. I was the training officer in personnel there. I traveled to Vienna with them. I traveled all around. I went over to Vienna for a couple of months, stay there, which by the way, I'm a big Strauss fan. From a friend of mine in Glyn called Jeremiah Maher, I became a very big Strauss fan. Love Strauss, and of course, the march music of what's his name in America?
Sousa.
John
Sousa.
Philip Sousa. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. US. His name was Sue, and he put USA onto the end of it. That's again.
Really?
Yeah, that's a fact. He was Sue. He was just SO, and he decided he'd make it more American because he wanted a job in West Point, and he decided that USA onto the end of it. So he ended up being called Sousa. John Phillips, his full title.
Interesting. Yeah.
But the book is very curious now. We're jumping again now. We'll go back to the Mormons before we finish up, but just go back again to the Yarmouth fish store. What happened with the Yarmouth fish store? Because I remember that there I suppose it was there in the 70s anyway. The Yarmouth.
It became the Yarmouth meat stores, I think, after. My mother left because she had an affair. And I suspected she was having an affair because as a young child, I can recall being in the back of a car with herself and another man as we went up O'Connell Street. Now, I would have been 4 about or no more, and into the Mechanics Institute where she played cards. I don't know who the man was, but I know who the man she went away with was. O'Donnell from Limerick. He worked in the store. One night, my father was cycling home after finishing his shift, which was 2 in the afternoon to 10 at night. So he decided, the mother said she'd be working late, so he decided to take a detour on his bike. So he cycled up to the shop, and he actually found my mother inside with that chap. He didn't say what they were doing, but they were there. So, that was the only time my father ever had anything critical to say about my mother. He never did. He was the kind of man who just didn't bother holding grudges. In fact, in my book, I say that I actually, the statement I make is that people don't hold grudges. Grudges hold people. I've yet to meet a happy person who holds a grudge against anyone. I've yet to meet one that holds a grudge. There is I know you're smiling, Tony, but yes. I was listening to a monk yesterday on TED Talk, actually, only for 2 minutes, and he said something about happiness and gratitude. And he said, some people think if they're happy, they'll be grateful. But he said, in fact, people that are grateful always end up being happy. If, for example, he said you could meet a person that has lost their family, that has been wronged, etc. And if they're grateful for what they are and where they are and how they are, they will be happy. On the other hand, if you meet somebody who's got everything, but they want more, they will not be happy because you can't find happiness in things, I digress. Yarmouth meat stores, after that time, my mother left. My mother went to live in I think it was number 6, Charlton on Medlock in Manchester. About 18 years ago, I finally went to Manchester to meet. Oh, I didn't tell you, by the way, my mother's sister was married to a man called Scanlon. You may know a Scanlon down in Dinan. You may know a Scanlon from Glyn.
Well, there's a few Scanlon families, yeah.
Well, there was a Mick Scanlon who used to come up to the school on the week mornings, Monday to Friday, at about 10 o'clock till about 3 o'clock to assist me. And Mick Scanlon mentioned one day that he knew this chap called Donovan in the army who left Ireland in a hurry. And that was, in fact, my mother's sister's husband. Left her in Thomingate, near Thomingate, across from the Catholic church, the St. Munchin's Church. As you come out the back entrance, there used to be a lane. There's a lane there.
Luke Kearney's chemist there.
Yes, just at the top of that lane, this sister of my mother's happened to live, and she had 4 children at the time, and her husband had left her and gone to England. The story I was told as a young boy was that her mother, her husband had gone with the Irish Army to serve somewhere in Britain. Now, that was a long story. I learned from Miss Scanlon that a guy called Donovan got into trouble and left the army and went to England. She got depressed. So my mother, her sister, asked my father, would he ever take in the 4 children? My father took in the 4 children, our first cousins, 2 boys, 2 girls. And then my mother left very soon after that, leaving my father with 8 children, 4 which were adopted, you might say, 1 who was deaf and dumb. He adopted 2 boys, 2 girls, our first cousins, and he kept them except for 1 who also went to Glen, by the way, Sean Malloy. That was back in the 50s. Sean was a bit wild. He went to den. So my father, 2-bedroom house in Thomegate, had his 4 children, one who was deaf and mute, and he had Eiley and Myra and Harry Malloy. That was 7 of us and him in a 2-bedroom house. And he kept them, and he never missed work with his drinking. He would come home at 1 o'clock in the morning drunk. He might fall on the floor upstairs, and but he was a very good man. He never spoke ill of my mother. He just made a remark that the day he found my mother, the night he found my mother with that man, these were his words to me, and the only ones ever. He said, he says, I gave him a dig and I laid him out. And you know what he said, which I found humorous? He said, in fact, he said, it would have been more appropriate for me to have hit her, he said, because she was the bigger culprit.
Yeah.
But other than that, he never commented on it. So I never developed a dislike or a hatred or anything for my mother. I dare say that she had enough troubles in her own life, and I don't, it doesn't matter to me, really.
Did you ever meet your mother again, Robert?
No, unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
She died in 1967 in the summer, I think it was May. And we got a telegram from that adopted brother who now lived in Manchester near her, saying, it was to my father, Bridie was her name, Bridget, said Bridie has passed away, arrangements have been taken care of, all is done. That was the telegram. I still have some of that telegram. Some because my father only showed me part of it. He tore the rest off and I don't know what was on it, But so that was she left and I never saw her again. I wasn't exactly heartbroken when she died because I didn't know her.
Yeah.
It would be cool, I mean. So, but everything has turned out.
How long did your father live for?
Father died in 1978, and the first week in May 1978. He
May as
died
well.
in his early 60s. He had retired from ranks. He retired, and due to his drinking habits, he spent his huge redundancy pay within 6 months. After that, every Thursday he would sit at home waiting for his pension. He would spruce himself up, and he would walk down Thomegate to the post office, crossing at Munchins, and he would draw his £15 pension. It was. The reason I know that is because he died on a Thursday morning before he could collect his pension one year, and having paid for the funeral with a little help from his sisters and a little help from my sister, I had to come up with a lot of money. When he paid for the funeral, he had nothing left. I went to claim his pension. They told me I couldn't have it because he didn't collect it, but I actually said, if my father qualified to collect his pension on Thursday morning, that means his qualification ended at 12 o'clock on Wednesday night. So I wrote to Dublin. They sent down the pension. It was £15 something, which was a help, at the time. So.
Yeah.
I knew some of it, Robert, from around you over the years, but I didn't realise about your mother leaving. I didn't know that, I just presumed that, and I knew you had been in Glen, but I just presumed again that what had you done to bring you there? I didn't realise it was from the home, I really didn't. Anyway, we get back to the Mormons now, which I'm very interested in as well. When there's a few things I want you to dispel, kind of, first of all, wealth within the Mormons. Number 2, Tom, have you ever come across wealth?
I was marked what Robert said there about they're raising money to build a church.
Yeah.
And that kind of flies in the face of the perception. I worked with a guy once who was in the Mormon church, and he told me he gave 10% of his salary to the church, but whether he did or not, I don't know.
I do.
What?
Yeah, I do. I give 10% of my salary, but I also charitable funds in the church as well. Yeah. That's a common thing it's a requirement. You don't have to. It's voluntary, and no one knows who else doesn't. I don't know any other. Well, of course, I'm the clerk, so I do the finances, and that's all confidential, But I've only that for a couple of years, and a couple of years, or maybe next month, or 10 years, I will be released, and I may get another calling, or I may be too old, or I may die, or whatever. But all callings most callings are temporary, except for apostles. Apostles and prophets are called, and they die in that position.
Yeah. I remember the president one time. There was a Benson there, wasn't there? One stage.
Yes, Ezra Taft Benson.
Yeah, and I remember there were 2 missionaries told me to remember that name and say it, and they'll think they'll have the new elders will have more respect for you when you mention, So I used to tell them I knew Benson. At one stage I was cut out because he died and somebody else took over, and I was telling him I knew the head man, President Benson,
Howard W. Hunter took over, but he died after 9 months. And Gordon B. Hinckley took over, and he served until he was almost 98. He died just before his 98th birthday. And we then had Thomas Monson, but we now have Russell M. Nelson. He's there about 4 years or so. He's 96 and in great shape. He addresses us at our conferences regularly, you know. So, of course, they always.
A lot of the leaders seem to live a long time, don't they?
Yes, they give a life of service to the church. Some of them do some. Well, you know, I mean, you know, if you're an apostle and you're 70 years of age, you're just considered one of the kids, like, you know. You can even bring your skateboard to meetings probably, and they won't laugh at you.
Yeah.
Another few of the myths. What about drinking, alcohol, smoking? What don't you have? You know, you hear these things, Mormon doesn't have this and the Mormon has that. First of all, alcohol and smoking.
We have a section in our Book of Doctrine and Covenants, a section 89, Doctrine and Covenants. You can look it up. It's a revelation given in March of 1836. I think it's 1836, stating that tobacco, alcohol, and hot drinks are to be avoided. So Mormons who wish to adhere to that, adhere to it. And the vast majority would, but some mightn't. Some might have a problem they can't, but it's expected that you would. And I haven't touched tea or coffee, alcohol or tobacco. Well, I didn't touch tobacco anyway. I was always into fitness, you know, since the 8th of October, 1976. I drank coffee, that was all, before I joined the church. I didn't drink it after that, you know, which is no big deal. You don't drink alcohol, heck, you save a lot of money and a lot of hassle. You don't smoke, you don't spend 50 euros a week on tobacco. At the end of the day, you know, if you do the best you can in the church, paying 10% of your income is a big saving compared to what you'd have paid if you didn't try to live these law commandments, you know.
Yeah.
So there is that side of it, you know.
Well,
As regards the wealth, let me say this, Tony. The church spends the money mostly as it gets it because we build temples all over the world. Temples are a different matter. They're not like meeting houses or chapels. They're where we go to take serious covenants, to make covenants with the Lord and to receive what we call an endowment. They're built all over the world. We now have over 200. When I joined the church, there were only about 18. And we now have over 200. And we've announced at the conference 3 weeks ago, we've announced another 20 that are going to be built in the next, well, it takes about 4 or 5 years at least from planning to plan, build, and use, you know.
Yeah. Tony mentioned, Mormons calling to house, like you were recruited is the wrong word, but you joined because of people. Like, how many new members join every year, you know, in Ireland?
Church, it's usually about a couple of 100,000 every year join the church.
Yeah.
We have about 16.5 million people in the church at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There's about 2,500 in Ireland.
Yeah.
I would say at least, you know, north and south, you know.
What about Limerick?
Actually, it's over 3,000, sorry. Yeah.
And how many would go to the church now if it was open at the moment, you know? How many would be there?
You'd probably have an attendance rate would be not too dissimilar to many churches, maybe 30% in some places.
Yeah.
Higher in some, lower in others, you know.
And what is it concerned now when you go, you know, like you go to Mass, you go to the Methodist preacher, what happens?
We have our first meeting, let's say a typical Sunday in Limerick branch. Other branches may have different times, you know, they may start at 9 or 10 or 11. We start, if we're at church in normal times, we're now online, it's different. We will start at 11. First meeting lasts for an hour. First thing we have an opening prayer, opening hymn, announcements, and then we would have a sacrament hymn. And while that hymn is being sung, 2 Aaronic priesthood holders would bless and prepare the sacrament to be passed, bread and water. And then after the hymn, one of them kneels and blesses the bread. It's passed to us in trays containing little tiny pieces of broken bread. After that, the water is passed to us. It's also blessed. And that's passed to us in tiny little plastic cups, which are then disposed of in recycling. And so we partake of the sacrament. Then we would probably have 2 speakers who would address us for probably 12 minutes each on a topic, sometimes chosen by them, sometimes assigned by the branch president or a member of the branch presidency. Branch president has 2 counselors, a first and second counselor, to run the branch with him. That would be typical. And then after that meeting, which would finish about 10-minute break, and then the following 50 minutes, we would have classes for the priesthood holders, for the sisters, for the younger youth between 12 and 18, the younger young women between 12 and 18, and for the primary children, as we call them, from 3 years old up to 11, shall we say, up to 11, 12. When they turn at 12 in that year, they go into the youth program, as we call it, for 12 to 18-year-olds. Then at 18, you go into the adult programs.
And Robert, there's another thing that the church is famous for is genealogy. There's a huge interest in genealogy.
Yes. Yeah. We have genealogy everywhere. We do genealogy. We start with our first 4-generation programs, we call it. My father's, my uncles, my aunts, my grandparents there, and on and on and on. There's no end to it, really. Like, you know, some of our members have gone back to the 1500s, you know. And
is this belief, or is it a myth that by doing so you contact souls from the past? Is that why? No. It's to do work for them that is called vicarious. Vicarious meaning work for someone that has passed on. For example, Christ did the greatest vicarious work ever done for mankind. Christ atoned in the Garden of Gethsemane on that Holy Thursday night for the sins and wrongs and depressions that we would have. He took them upon his shoulders. That's a vicarious, like a parent would take upon the troubles of his children if he could, or if she could. He then was crucified and suffered appallingly and died and was resurrected. That resurrection for the first time opened the gates to resurrection for all those that had died previous, from the time of Adam, shall we say, down to that time. But to enter the celestial kingdom, as we would call it, the higher echelons, we say, of all people must be baptized. That's in the New Testament, it's in the Old Testament, it's in the Book of Mormon, it's in the teachings of most Christian churches, if not all. So you say to yourself, what about those that didn't get a chance to hear the gospel? Everyone gets a chance, but lots of people have passed on, the vast majority. Now, in the spirit world, you may remember or not that in the New Testament, in the book of Peter, they talked about Jesus going to the spirits in prison. Jesus, when he died, when he was resurrected, by the way, you remember he said to Mary when he met her at the tomb, "Do not handle me, for I'm not flesh and bone, I have not yet been to my Father who is in heaven." So Jesus Christ had not yet gone back to heaven at that time. He visited during the few time after, he visited the spirits in the afterlife, shall we say, in prison, in the paradise, shall we say. He didn't go to the prison. There's two afterlife, there's paradise and the prison before we get our final judgment. For those who live righteously, as they understand it, not members of the church only, because we're in the same boat as everyone else. Everyone's got to live a good life to be to get to heaven.
I thought, Robert, the thinking behind this, I'm sure Tom is roughly the same, that if I could trace an unbroken line back on both my father's side and my mother's side, that they became Mormon in death.
No, I'll tell you what it is. It doesn't matter. By the way, if you told me that your great-grandfather was dead and you wanted me to get the ordinances done for him in the temple, the ordinances are baptism and confirmation. They're the main ordinances. Everyone must be baptized. So my father died without being baptized. He was never a member of the church. This is what our temples are for, primarily, one of the reasons. I have been to the temple, which I go to in London. I now go to the Preston Temple, Charlie. I have been there. I have been baptized on his behalf. He will be approached in the spirit world. He will be given a chance to hear the gospel. If he accepts the gospel, the baptismal work has been done vicariously by me. You remember Paul in the New Testament said this. He said these words, they're written there. He said, "Why else are they then baptized for the dead, if the dead rise not at all?" Even in that time, he recognized that it was common for people to be baptized for the dead. Some people, and one particular politician north of the border, had claimed that we were compelling people to join the church. No, agency, free will, is one of the main things that will not be taken from us by God. We have the right to refuse whatever spiritual teachings we hear, whatever missionaries visit us from any church. That's a cornerstone of our religion and of God's teaching.
But Robert, what's the sign then? Like, if you say you approach your father, if he accepts from the after, like, how do you know that your father would accept if he's dead?
I may not know that until I die. I don't know it.
All right.
What we're doing is we will do the work for all beings, all human beings who have passed beyond the veil that we are allowed to.
Yeah.
They will decide, it's a bit like someone putting a present for me somewhere and saying it's
Yeah.
there. If you want to go and get it, and I may never take it. I mean,
Yeah.
not everyone will join the church, even after life, And by the
Yeah.
way, it's not the same after. The church is just a vehicle, by the way, to have God's work done on earth. The church in itself is just that, a vehicle. Afterlife, it's not a matter of joining the church. It's a matter of accepting God's commandments.
Mm.
The vehicle of the church is not the same necessarily,
And another thing, Robert, you can spot members of the church when they go around, because they're very well dressed and very well groomed and clean cut. Is that a requirement, or is it like,
It is a requirement of our missionaries.
Yeah.
And of those of us who attend church on the Sabbath, we are asked, would we wear our best clothes if necessary.
Yeah.
I always wear my best suit, shirt and tie when I go to church, because I believe I'm worshiping when I go to church. Now, worshiping isn't only done in church. Let me say that, And if I were working in a garden and church time came and I was doing a work of charity, let's say church came on a Sunday and I had been changing a tire for somebody and I got full of mud and everything, I'd walk into church. I'd be as, it's not the clothes you wear that counts. It's the attitude that counts. The attitude. When I go for a job interview, I dress my best. If I'm going to meet President Higgins, I dress my best. If I'm going to worship God, I dress my best. My best might be a pair of jeans, tackies, and a torn shirt.
Mm.
That might be my best. So,
No, but it's just something that always struck me. They always look very well presented. I'm not. That's a compliment, not
and the missionaries are always well dressed, because it's a requirement when you go on a mission for the 2 years or 18 months or 2.5 years or 12 months. They're minimum. 2 years the average for a male, 18 months is the average for a female. Some of them go longer, some shorter, but they're the norm. They bring with them enough clothes to cover that, enough shirts to cover it so they can have them laundered, and they're asked to look their best. Now, once a week, they have what they call their PE day, their preparation day, etc., which is a day they don't normally do missionary work. They go away, they might organize a game of kickball, they might go and have a McDonald's, they might even, in better times, they might, as some have travel up to County Clare to a site, take photographs. In other words, they almost become tourists for the day if they can. And that's their PE day when they relax. Sunday is the day they come to church. The other days of the week, they're what we call proselyting. Seeking converts. These days they can't proselyte, except they go to our chapel, they go to our family. We have a family history center in every chapel, by the way, which has the genealogy. But nowadays it's going online. We won't need family history centers. You get it in your house. We get it in our homes. But if you're ever interested, it's called Family Search.
I know, I've used it. It's excellent. Yeah.
My friend Patsy Pearl said that he spent a lot of time outside in the church going through records, that somebody gave him access outside. He obviously had an appointment, but he said he learned an awful lot from some of the records, outside in the church and during the day.
Yes, our chapels and our centres are open to the public. All they have to do is make sure that there's somebody there. You don't call out at 12 o'clock at night, and we have welcomed in lots of people who are not members and who don't even know any of us come to the chapel. They make an appointment. They come up when we're open, like usually it's Tuesday 7 to 9 or Tuesday afternoon and in the morning, or sometime we announce the times. But at this time, there is none really. We can't.
And in normal times, do you take groups? Like, could a group come to visit? Or?
Of course. As a matter of fact, one of the groups I showed around were the Muslim Brotherhood from up in the centre, which is near us, not the other Muslim brother. This is a brotherhood from the local imam. Some years ago, when I was branch president, I visited the Islamic centre above on a couple of occasions with my family. We met him. We went and went to saw their prayers meetings, and I went etc. And then one day a group of them came and I showed them around the chapel. In fact, they were quite excited when I quoted a scripture from what we call the Book of Abraham, which is a book, one of our sets of scriptures. And just to get it clear, we believe in the Bible as well, being the Word of God. We believe the Book of Mormon to be the Word of God. The Doctrine and Covenants we believe to be the Word of God, and we believe the Pearl of Great Price is the Word of God.
Where did the word Mormon come from?
The book, one of the people featured in the Book of Mormon it's called after him. He's called Mormon, and he abridged it, put it together. So it
Mhm.
became known as the plates we found that were abridged by Mormon. So
Yeah.
these are the plates
right.
of Mormon, and these are the people who have them. So we, from the start, in the 6th of April, 1830, the name of the church was the Church of Jesus Christ, and the
And,
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
and like, would the church prefer not to be called Mormon? You know,
Well, one of the reasons we prefer to be called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is because, when we go to visit people in countries and we knock on the door, and if we were called Mormons, they wouldn't even gather that we were talking about Jesus Christ. We have been accused in the past of not teaching doctrine of Christ. I mean, for goodness sake, we're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Latter-day Saints is attached on because these are the latter days that we are in. And the saints in the time of Christ were the saints in the meridian of time, middle of time. We are the saints in the latter days, but we're the same group.
yeah, yeah.
First of all, just a comment. There were two, you reminded me a while ago when you said about not drinking tea and coffee. I met two missionaries one time and I told them that, and they said, would I not give up tea or coffee? I said, you must be joking me. I couldn't give up tea, you see. But they brought me up a thing called barley cup.
Yes, you can buy that in Tesco's or any health shop.
Well, Robert, I tell you now, the only way I could describe it now, it'd be like using a tea bag and putting it out in the clothesline and bringing it in and using it again.
Well, I drink Postum, I drink Caro, I drink barley cup, I drink many drinks. I'm a fan of hot chocolate, of course. I have been all my life,
It's like a poor version of Horlicks to look at inside.
Okay.
I couldn't drink it, I'm afraid, lads.
Tony, most of the things we drink are acquired tastes. I dare say for those who drink, the first time they drink a pint of Guinness, they probably thought, what in heaven's name is this? It's an acquired taste, My wife loves the barley cup. I love barley cup. I love Postum. There's a few other drinks I can't remember. There's Awake. There's I could go. There's about 10 of them in the back of my head.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Also, any interest in your family in the Mormons?
When you say my family, who do you mean?
Any of them follow your footsteps, in other words?
Well, some of them have at times. Some of them haven't at times. They go their own way very often. Sometimes, our children. Well, since, as I've said, ours is a church where we don't force anybody to do anything. We bring them to church with us until they're a certain age because we're not going to leave them at home. You're not going to leave a 6-year-old child at home and go to church. You'll be arrested. And taken away from them. So.
You're going to Glen. Your children are going to Glen.
That's right. No, in fact, these days they wouldn't. They'd be left on the road.
But we're talking here over an hour and 10 minutes. Anyway, first of all, I think we've learned a fair bit now about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What we must organise, if we're allowed, that's from you, from the government, to bring the Historical Society out for an evening, out to see the church outside. It'd be nice,
I can promise you now here because I sit with the branch presidency and the clerk, and we four of us meet every Monday. And I have not the slightest doubt that Tom Murphy, sure, you met him.
Oh yeah.
Tom would be absolute. Look, everybody is welcome to the church as long as they set up a time. We go there, we show them, and we do show many people. We have a baptismal font in the chapel at the side as well. We have toilets, men and women, toilets for the disabled. We have television. We have a pull-down screen for broadcasts from. We get live broadcast. If I went over to chapel now and pull down the screen and turn on the receiver, there's something happening in Salt Lake now, which is broadcast live, etc. We have offices. We have sports. We have badminton out there. We have a stage where we hold full shows. We hold Patrick's Day. We haven't held one in 2 years for this year and the last year. And we've had many people perform. Usually they're 2-hour performance. And we have table tennis, badminton. We have board games we play. We have activity nights during the week. Usually 4 or 5 nights of the week are taken up with activities. Sometimes there's midweek classes in genealogy. We have Sean Falloon, one of our members, runs classes on self-reliance, for example. And there's 7 different courses to help people to become self-reliant. And one of them alone is how people can become better in themselves, kind of a well-being course, which he's very good at. People preparing CVs, job search, for example. I was the employment specialist for the district Connacht in Munster for many years back in the 80s because of my experience in industry, because I've been training officer in industry for years, etc. And we have outdoor soccer for the kids as well. We have indoor little hockey. Now it's a small area because it's our chapel is built in such a way that the chairs can be put away. The curtains close at the podium, which is the place where we do the sacrament from, and so therefore we're left with the chapel. It's a small building, but it's big enough for badminton. The badminton court standard size. It's perfect. I played badminton for years myself, you know. And
Robert, did you play any sports in Glyn?
I played for Glyn itself. I played with, you remember Dovey Martin?
Yeah.
I played
with
Dovey. Deborah Martin lives near me. His sister.
Oh, yeah.
I played hurling and I played football with Glyn. I was 15 at the time, or 14.
Yeah.
So we won some kind of West County championships at the time.
Yeah, because there's a shoemaker in Malloy Street. He won a medal. What?
Tom Kelly.
Is it? Yeah.
Tom and I were in Glyn together.
Yeah.
He just read it. He just got a copy of my book there a few months ago and read it as well, you know.
Yeah.
And Tom learned he's applied his trade in Glyn.
Yeah.
And he had a huge. Tom and I played together, you see, on the same teams. Tom was very good at hurling, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, he won a county minor medal with Glyn hurling. But
and I won a medal in football, I think. Yeah, I played hurling, but mostly football.
But the thing is, Tom said to me like that nobody comes to him for his story because he has good stories. You know, a lot of his time was, like you said, not bad. You know, and
yes, I would say
the media is only interested in the bad side, like, you know, and exactly bad things happen, you know. Yeah.
Now, bad things have happened in family homes. Now we're going to shut down family homes because bad things happen in some of them.
Yeah.
Are we going to condemn every parent? You know, I would have to say this: some of the Christian brothers there were very inventive and very innovative in helping. I mean, we had one come along and he decided to introduce us to basketball. We put on shows we had a concert hall where we watched films and we put on shows. We put on one show years ago, it was all years ago, 1962 or 3. We put on a show called The Pirates of La Vega. Now, La Vega is across the water from you. It was based on the Pirates of Penzance. It had all those songs in it, like, you know. Yeah. And we had drills and gymnastics as part of the show. It was a concert with a play. Yeah. I starred in one of the short 20-minute plays. My starring role didn't have much words in it, actually, you know.
Yeah.
That was quite an achievement for them at the time, you know. So.
But I went to the primary school at that time and in Glyn, and I didn't have any of those experiences, so maybe I could claim off the state. I was deprived in primary school. Yeah.
And I was aware, I will have to say.
I tell you, we got some beatings in the primary school as well, you know. I mean, you could talk about hardship. But anyway,
I was aware of one of the Christian brothers who abused one of the lads.
Yeah.
I was aware of him, and he was moved out of Glyn, but unfortunately he was moved to Tralee. Now there was 85 or 90 boys in Glyn, there was 400 in Tralee boys' school, so I shudder to think. But look, in those days, other than that, in fact, I know I've gone on and on, but there was a young man, sorry, my age, but then again, I am a young man till I die, I suppose. I won't say his name, but he was in the LIT at a function where one of his daughters graduated. It's about 4 years ago. I went in to speak to him because he'd been in Glyn the same time as me in the school. And I said, what did you think of the school? He said, I have my own business. This is my 4th child putting through 3rd level and paying for the meetings. And he says, I would not have done none of that without Glyn. That's what he said to me. And others have said differently.
Yeah. Well, it's like a primary school. You ask 10 people about a primary school, I say, I hate it. So it's no different, you know, and like, But the thing is, good news doesn't make stories. You know, like that man with the 4 children, he won't be interviewed. It's the people with the bad news will, you know. Anyway.
Could you get me a picture of that machine they have in Salt Lake, where all the elders go in and they come out the other side in those plastic suits? There's some kind of a machine over there.
We have one at the chapel. I go in my working clothes at 10 o'clock on Sunday. And I come out after church and I'm a different guy, you know. Yeah.
I remember the part of my mates with us that they're like plastic suits. If you put a cigarette up to the suit, it made a hole, and no way could you fix it. So it's completely So I thought that is some kind of a machine that they went in and they came out the other side with their hair cut and collar and tie, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're waffling on now. We're kind of running out of time, running out of steam. Robert, can I thank you very much for coming on tonight and talking about the church and your experiences in Glyn. and your book. I forgot to bring it with me now. You haven't
No,
a copy.
that is my book.
Oh yeah, hold it up. Oh yeah, that's it. I did not see that coming. Just like a film star on that.
But you,
I went through the machine in Salt Lake before I got taken.
I totally did.
did you think of publishing it, Robert?
Well, people have said it to me that I should publish it, but I just didn't see. I got 70 copies for friends. And by the way, Tom, incidentally, as soon as Tony gives me your address, I'd like to give you a gift of a copy as well.
I want to contact you just to talk to you about Lynn as well. So
That's
I'll
right.
get
Well,
them up,
if Tony can text me the full address, I will
yeah.
have it sent off during the week to yourself,
Thanks.
Tom. And I'd like to thank both you and Tony for your
I enjoyed listening. And it's not just about Lynn. I enjoyed listening to your whole story. You know, and you're very frank about your background and everything. Yeah.
As I said, we had a little chat the other night for 4 hours. You know, that was that.
That's right, yeah. I had a crick in my neck when I got home because I was standing in the doorway. That's gone, you know.
I say, there's not, when people have that at the start, they begin to wonder, is this thing going to last 4 hours?
Thank
Anyway,
you.
thanks very much, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you both. And Tony, as soon as you can, send me that, okay?
I will. I'll tell you, I'll talk to you later on. And we're, of course, as I said before, we're on the Limerick Historical Society. You can get these on the Limerick Historical Society website, and also on livemedia.com. Just put in Live Media and I'm sure it'll come up. And this program, Robert, should be up tonight at about 9 o'clock, we should that, you know, and you'll be able to see it then and laugh at, don't laugh at us, but you can laugh at yourself. You know.
Do I look it up on Lear?
You can look it up on Live, yeah, Live Media.
Limerick Historical Society. I found the other ones. I was looking at them, yeah.
Get it up on that then as well, you know. And again, to thank you for coming on. Okay, Robert?
Thank you both, and have a good night. God bless you all.
Thanks, Robert.